Welcome to the All In, All Out podcast. My name is Shannon Ross, founder and executive director of The Community. This podcast is focused on the goal of creating a justice system more worthy of that name, and why you, no matter who you are, should care. The name of the podcast refers to the fact that we must be all in and go all out to truly address the way justice is viewed and applied in America. Furthermore, the sense of separation the system imposes is an illusion. What happens to individuals on both sides of the fence is connected and tied to the same fate. How we treat incarcerated people reflects the state and direction of society. Those inside are all out, and those of us outside are all in. As for me, I am no more than a dreamer who knows there is a better way and is devoted to reaching out and holding on, even when it is uncomfortable, because connections and empathy are the foundation of the types of strong, healthy communities that we all want. I spent 17 years in the Wisconsin prison system, where I obtained my bachelor's degree in business administration, had several articles published locally and nationally, co-created a mental health program that now exists in several facilities throughout the state, and founded The Community. Upon release at the end of 2020, I obtained my master's degree in sustainable peace building at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, co-founded a successful multi-dimensional justice solutions firm called Paradigm Shift, became a first-time father, and I am currently a consultant at Marquette University's higher education and prison program. But these achievements have occurred alongside numerous and constant failures. Therefore, however, remain all in and all out. Today we have Simmone Kilgore, and as usual, I'm going to let Simmone introduce yourself to the wonderful people.
All right, thank you for this opportunity. I'm Simmone Kilgore, a licensed therapist in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My focus is trauma therapy, so I work with a lot of survivors of trauma, whether it be sexual assault, domestic violence, family violence, community violence, gun violence, or things that happen, once people try to reintegrate themselves into society and have to work through past traumas to help them kind of navigate what that's like.
Why have you found yourself in that space? Why is that where you're working?
It's interesting because I did not plan to do this work at all. I really do think that when you work with survivors of any types of trauma, it is a calling. It's not easy. It's not something I wake up and I'm just super duper excited about. But the idea of sharing the message of hope, I cannot help it. I think everybody deserves an opportunity to kind of understand like what happened to them is not who they are. What they've done is not who they are. And that if you leave space for hope, which is like my terminology, then we have a little bit of space to figure out, okay, what happened to me? How did it affect me? And how can I create change for myself? Because I believe it's possible. So that in itself is what drives me. I cannot turn it off.
Yeah, the calling part resonates with me because I've said that commonly. And even when we recently were interviewing people, I was making it clear this isn't a job, this is a paid calling. Yeah. So like if you're looking for a job, this probably isn't the place for you to come because you're gonna get burnt out or some conflict's gonna happen. Yeah. So do you work with people that are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated in this work?
Mostly formerly incarcerated. I haven't worked with many people that are incarcerated. Over the years, maybe a few, specifically survivors of human trafficking that are incarcerated due to an act that they may have committed during that time. But for the most part, working with folks that come home is my passion.
And so this next question I have is not in any way to like take any attention from the wonderful work that you do. Yeah. I think your father's experience is really pertinent to this conversation. Absolutely. As like a grounding for why you know this space.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a little girl, my father was incarcerated. A couple of times. I don't have a great memory of how many times the back and forth happened, but it did, and it absolutely affected our family, my mom and my brother and I. And so at the time, I was a little girl, and I just remember even kids on the block saying, like, where's your dad? Where's your dad at? And I don't think I remembered how much it affected me until I became an adult and started doing this kind of work. Because again, by the time I was maybe 10 or 12, he, had kind of cleaned up things for himself and created a life where he worked in the field of drug and alcoholism and trying to help people through recovery. because that was kind of his entryway to criminal behavior and kind of making mistakes, was the use of drugs. And so he came back into society and got the licensure and all the things he needed to do to help people, and then started working with ex-offenders that had come home to help them with housing and job placement and connecting back to society in any way that made sense, whether it was through family or societal things. So I've seen him do that work most of my life. I've seen the passion, and my mother as well has done work in the field of psychology, kind of helping people reintegrate into society. But she worked more with youth and youth programs. And so like after juvenile detention centers, and then they might be in halfway houses or things like that. She did a lot of work with youth in that capacity as well.
And so the topic of like today's conversation is kind of really pertinent, because you've seen somebody come home even after back and forth stints, which I think most people would say, after like the second or third time, kind of disregard somebody, if not the first, right? Yeah. And so you've seen how that can become, like a whole different life is still available for you. Yeah. So I'm curious, what is your thoughts on the phrase, everyone deserves a second chance? Which is a vague question, I understand that.
It's huge, and I thought through it quite a bit, because I think we've talked before in the past, Shannon, that it's such a cliche thing now that we think it doesn't have any meat. And I think that we have to hold on to this idea that, there's hope for everybody. I don't think as society we should give up on anybody and the opportunities that they may have to change things around for themselves. It can happen with work, but I think it's such a watered down concept when you don't add other ingredients into the pot, meaning accountability and the thing that holds us really clear to ourselves, which is processing how I got here in the first place. If people don't bring those things to consciousness, this idea of I got here and these things happen and there's been this long stint of whatever, because why? If there's no understanding, if there's no healing, if there's no processing, if there's no therapy, which I promote, it's very hard to receive the second chance and be successful with this opportunity. It's very hard. So I think the simplicity of the statement is what is problematic at times, number one. The other components is we all know that everybody doesn't receive a second chance fairly. Some people don't receive a fair first chance, which is why we get in these situations sometimes all the cards are against us. And so there's a lot of research that shows, even twin studies where folks can have the same kind of genetic background, same environmental factors, same nature versus nurture, which is we talk a lot about in the field of psychology, and due to certain circumstances and how they affect somebody in early childhood, how it impacts the brain, how you perceive yourself in the eyes of those that love you or those that surround you, really kind of dictates how you'll move next. And so it's very important early on to teach children, the necessary tools to navigate. How do I make the right decisions for myself, even when I'm faced with certain adversities?
You just touched on something, because I hadn't necessarily thought of that recently as I was kind of preparing for this topic. And that's the fact that that term, everyone deserves a second chance, it also, in terms of some of my critique of that belief in general, but it also handicaps the field of reentry and redemption in the sense that people who are looking to give somebody a second chance, if you've been out once already and messed up again, they're going to be like, well, you got your second chance. It's like you still haven't actually got a first in a lot of cases, right?
In a lot of cases, we didn't even have a first.
Right.
And I think the systems assume that we all come out in this game equal, with equal opportunities and fair playing fields. And that is not the case. So I think before we get to the second chance, we have to examine the first chance. And so then after the second chance, who are we to say that people don't have an opportunity to have a seventh and an eighth and a ninth? I don't want to be that judge and juror. I don't want to be the person that says there's no hope or there's no possibility for those that may, enter back into the system based on a decision that they made, or a parole violation or something like that. You know what I mean? And so I think we are quick to label and place people where we think they should go without understanding at all what they've experienced and how those experiences shape your brain and the way you view the world very early in life.
That's a really difficult thing to get people that aren't like in this kind of work or have that experience to understand. Because you have a whole swath of the population that just feels like, they have the ethos of the individuality and the individualism and the divine conquest of America, where like you want it, you just go get it. It's that simple. Yeah. And one of the things that I've always had a kind of an issue with the reentry simulations I've experienced. Have you ever had those? You ever experienced any of those? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like they give everyone this like character profile, right? Mm-hmm. So your name is Paul. You just got out. You have one kid. You have no job. You have a place, right? Your name is, Clara. You just got out. You have no kids. You have a job. You have nowhere to stay, right? So you have to kind of navigate what your situation is. And then they have booths, which is the parole agent, the bus station, the food. So you're kind of experiencing what it's like, the inconveniences. You go to somebody, they just up and decide to close shop, and they're sitting right there eating food, but they're supposed to pretend like they're closed. And you experience all that. You can't go anywhere without a bus ticket. Everyone asks you that. And what I always was like annoyed by in that is it's emphasizing the inconvenience aspect of reentry. It's not talking anything to the emotional and mental baggage that people carry. And everyone in that game should have some physical element where they're slower or they have like a 20-pound weight on them, because that's really what it is. It's doing all this stuff with this everyday narrative you have that you're not good enough, no one's going to give you a chance, all the trauma in your life playing over and over and over again. And so the second chance element is interesting because not only, I feel like we're hurting ourselves in one way, but we're hurting ourselves in the fact that the language makes other people feel like if you've gotten past a certain point, you don't deserve any more chances when you haven't got your own. And there's Second Chance Month. April is Second Chance Month. I've never been a big fan of that because I'm kind of a curmudgeon in general towards like holidays and dates, so like pay no attention to that. But Terrell Blount, who runs the formerly incarcerated College Graduates Network, he recently approached me when I was at an event with him, and he said, I'm trying to push back against the second chance term. I don't like that term, I don't like that month. Because it, as you just said, it like limits us to this second chance, right? When some people need their fifth, fourth, sixth. I don't know why I went in reverse and then back direction there, but so we're going to be doing an Instagram live with him and a woman named Stacey Burnett from another organization in April to talk about like this is his beginning of his journey to get rid of that term for Second Chance Month. And he said it's kind of tough because the president actually decreed it as a month now. So like I don't know how I'm going to do this. I was like, but I'm with you. I mean, this is the type of stuff I like to do is push back against the common thoughts. But so yeah, that was just interesting that you mentioned that. I hadn't even thought about that recently. The other part of it though is I always, and me and Kelly talk about this a lot, does everyone actually deserve a second chance? Like some people, a lot I would say, life has dealt them a terrible hand, right? Life has screwed some people massively. And the bottom line is, although it was unfair for them, they're just not able to exist in society in a way that we need people to be around us. And that's an unfortunate statement, but it's like, what do we do with that aspect of the everyone deserves a second chance comment? Yeah,
it's interesting. I was looking through some research, and there's many researchers that talk a little bit about those, what people like to label career criminals, and those that have entered into some criminal behavior from like adolescence. And kind of like once they mature and get to a certain age and maybe they have families or get married or find stability at work or in the community, right? Doing a lot of the work that you're doing, then you can figure out how it feels to be valued, respected and seen, heard, which all people want and deserve, to be seen, to be valued, to be heard, to be connected. We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and like that idea of connection is so very needed. So I think that there's a certain group of society, those that have been involved with criminal behavior or whatever, that figure that thing out, with accountability and maybe their family connections, or maybe this huge desire to want to change the way that they show up in the world. And then there's approximately, about 20 to 25% of folks that we have deemed, and for lack of a better term, is the word sociopath, the inability to feel, the inability to connect, the inability to take accountability, the inability to heal. And so for those particular people, sometimes a second chance is just, down to the 15th or 16th or 17th chance, because it is something that is innately going on internally and chemically in the way they are wired, that they just cannot stop the behavior. That's what they know. And so they're on like this cycle. And that's a percentage of folks as well. Again, I think the opportunity to give somebody a chance is important. But once we find out that that's something that is not going to be a positive outcome for them and society as a whole, then I think we have to consider that as well.
Do you feel it hurts the overall work we're trying to do around healing and community restoration by telling a story that a lot of people in society just know, even we know that it's not true? But I think, I'll give an example. So we had this meeting with a politician one time, and his question, conservative politician, very well known, and he asked this question twice. It was something he almost wanted us to agree on for him to be able to move forward in the conversation. And he was saying, what percentage of people do you think can actually make it when they get out, or can turn their life around? And so some of my colleagues that were there were saying, well, everyone can. Mm-hmm. And what I felt was that contingent of society, they just want to know that you understand that there are some people, you don't really believe everyone's going to be okay if we give them, candles and cake and balloons, right? And so I think there is a definite detriment to the work we're doing by pushing this narrative that everyone knows is not true. And some of us say behind closed doors and some of us say in public. Yeah. And can we have an honest conversation and hold space for the fact that, some people may not, but let's talk about why that happened in the first place. Let's change the conversation from, it's not about does this person deserve it or not. It's about why are people getting to that point? Right. And how do we create, a better process in society? Absolutely. So I just think it's an interesting, I don't know what your thoughts are, and if you think it is harming or if you think it is better to kind of keep pushing the second chance, everyone deserves a second chance narrative.
I think it can be harming because it is limiting. Kind of what you said very early on. It's a limited viewpoint. If I give you a second chance, Shannon, then I won't be able to give you a third or fourth. I think that is a trivial way to look at things, and it doesn't encompass the full person, their full experiences, their full life, and it doesn't leave space for hope, and I believe in that. So that idea of how many ever times it takes me to get it right, I would hate to keep having to re-enter into incarceration in order for that to happen, but for some people it might take more than 2 times to get this thing right. And for many, it has. For many people that I work with, it has taken more than just 2 or 3 times in prison, in jail, before they finally say, enough is enough. I've hurt myself, therefore I've hurt my family and my loved ones, and I want to figure out what I need to do moving forward. Very rarely do I meet people that, once they got that second chance, it was a straight street from here. So I think that's the proof in the pudding, that's a rare thing anyway,
And that equates with, I think, anything in society. When you're trying to quit something or get away from somebody, how many people break up with somebody and then get back with the same person when they shouldn't be with them for a couple times?
I mean, try to quit anything.
Yeah, the deterrence element has become more of a way to look at recidivism too. I don't know how far along it's gotten, but it's people that study criminal justice reform, professors, they know that number, recidivism, those of us in the work, we know that number is just stupid. Yeah. And so deterrence has become more of this element of, a person might come out, they might go back in, but it's for less time. Yes. And then maybe after the 3rd time, some folks, that's when they get it,
that's
right? It's just, they're petering out of the system is kind of the view.
Personally and professionally, I've met many people who maybe after the 3rd time in, it's a shorter time, but it has gotten to a place where they really feel the impact at this point, entering back into those spaces and what it does to the psyche, hearing the noises in prison and jail, some of the things I hear in my therapy practice, understanding the loved ones that they've hurt or disappointed or seeing their faces again and again. At that point, because it seems like maybe the first stint is support. We got you, we have this hope for when you come home, and it's hard. It's hard to see your loved one re-enter those systems again, and to figure out how do I still maintain support for them and don't feel like all hope is lost. Well, when that person that's re-entering often feels like they've disappointed everybody that has supported them, at some point they sometimes get it. Yeah, you just don't know what's going to click for somebody. And I feel like because we don't have that answer, I can't answer it for you, you cannot answer it for me, then we don't have the right to say it should click for you this time. You don't know what's going to click for somebody. And so I don't want to be that person that says, well, this is the second chance and this is when people get it, because that's just not true.
And it gets even, there's so many elements that are even more complex without going into a metaverse of complexity. But I know a number of people who easily right now could be back in prison, but they're still out, and they've made it because they were lucky to get a break 1 or 2 times early on. And I know many people who didn't get that break, and they should be out here, right? It's like the subjectivity and subtlety of it are
I think
so
it's so convoluted that's why we cannot have these, again, thinking about the campaign for you and your friend, like that second chance piece. I think it's so convoluted and so many factors in there that we don't have, it's got to be case by case. Each and every person has to be reviewed in a way where their input matters, you know, and whatever social supports or things that are in place for them matters, as well as accountability, which is huge. It's huge.
First step.
It's a huge thing.
So if, you know, not like I don't even know, I'm just curious what you would say would be a better way to frame that topic. Because when I hear Second Chance Month, what I hear is a conversation around the fact that we shouldn't judge people by what they did. Like they were trying to find a cute way to say that. Maybe I'm wrong in the definition of it, but that's what I've always interpreted it as. And so I don't know if there's anything you think would be a better slogan or a better way to to label that.
I don't know if it would be a slogan. I have a whole paragraph I could say about it, but I do think that we have to leave space for the idea that humans are varied, and very rarely is a second chance enough. I think if anything, that would be my slogan. Very rarely is a second chance enough.
Like that. Yeah, that's for like on the spot sloganizing. That's pretty good.
Very rarely, very rarely, but it can happen. But it's more rare than not.
A shout out to Roy for Sloganize. Our friend Roy, you know Roy. Roy has a thing he calls sloganized psychology.
I love it. I'm sure he does.
So the last question I have for you then is kind of bring it back to your life. What do you feel like, from what you've learned and experienced in the work, has been the most impactful for your personal life?
Yeah. For myself, I have to remind myself to leave space for hope, to understand human beings are flawed, to understand that sometimes you won't find any resolve in certain situations. Sometimes you got to kind of deal with the idea of it's as resolved as it's going to get. You know, we want people to have accountability, and we want them to straighten up, and we want them to do things according to what we think they should do. And that's not my path, and it's not my business to kind of dictate that for people. So in my personal life, I've had to really figure that out. And I have. Like, that path for that person is their own. And if you love somebody, if you are connected to somebody in friendship or whatever, if I'm a therapist that supports those folks, that pace is one of its own. And I don't get to dictate that. I'm not the puppeteer of it. I get to sit back and be a part of it and set healthy boundaries for myself, extremely, but at the same time, I don't get to shape that thing. That's their route. And I think one of the things that people don't take into account when we talk about second chances for folks is that we want to dictate what that looks like. The courts, the parole systems, the probation and parole officers, the family members that when they come home, we kind of want to dictate what that looks like for that person. And we don't get to do that. And so that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. I think being a trauma therapist and watching the slow progression of people understanding their whys. Once people get that, Shannon, it is amazing what they can do with their life when they understand why I did what I did. My behaviors happened because of my emotions. And these emotions were in place for what? How can I navigate that differently? So as a therapist, I get it, but I had to transfer that over to my personal life as well, and it has helped me tremendously.
And I think I mentioned this to you before. We were on a panel one time, and you are one of the strongest examples for me of kind of what I call invested non-attachment. Like, you'll dive in and give your all to somebody, but then like also be okay to just step away.
Yes,
Like, that person's made their path, and
Yes,
I'm not gonna, continue to follow that emotionally journey they're on, because it's overwhelming. Like, you can't do the work, right? And so I can say I've personally seen that.
Yeah, I've learned from it. I've done it before. And so, those days and nights where you feel so overwhelmed by somebody else's life circumstances and their choices, that's not a good feeling. And so when you really know that you have no control over it, it's a beautiful release. It's a beautiful release to say they have their own free will. And I am here to support as I can, what I'm capable of. But free will is everybody's choice, and I don't want to interfere in that at any way. Because the other thing is that path may lead them to the fifth chance, where they come out as dynamic as possible. Yeah. And how dare I interrupt that? How dare I interrupt that?
Never know what's good or bad of life element, yeah.
Shame absolutely dictates oftentimes how you protect yourself in the shame. So if I'm ashamed of something that I've done in the past, I may overprotect myself by not being able to focus on the accountability piece. Or shame oftentimes spirals us down into other poor behaviors and decisions. I might as well, because I'm already here. People already see me as this. But oftentimes when you shame and feel it internally for yourself, it is very hard to look up and navigate that I am not what I've done. And therefore I don't have to behave in that realm, right? I can forgive myself, understand why I made the choices that I made. And sometimes, sometimes you don't have a full understanding of why I hurt somebody else or why I committed that specific crime. And so the shame can absolutely overwhelm you. But working very closely with trauma therapists or a specific therapist that works on shame and helping you to reduce it and to understand your whys and not internalize it will help you not harm yourself anymore. Shame is self-harming, and it does nobody any good to walk in the shame of what the past brought. Nobody benefits from that, not you and not society. And so it's a lot of internalized work when trying to help people understand how shame kind of dictates. I talk to people a lot about what's in the driver's seat, and if driving you is shame and guilt or anger, then that is absolutely how your life will go. It's okay to have it in the car because it's a component to many people's lives. Sometimes we don't completely get rid of shame, but you can absolutely reduce it, and you can absolutely learn to talk to it and say, I know you're there. I know why you're there. You're still the best speaker of the house, so go ahead and don't let anything dictate that. Kind of when you talk to people, Shannon, I've heard you say this, I think, before in the past, it's not as important about what I've done or what I've done in the past to get to a place where I was incarcerated. It's more about the person that I am and what has come from that. So let's focus on that. So you won't allow anybody to get you to a place of where they're going to shame you, where at the same time, internally, you felt it at some point, because we all do. Everybody in the world feels it. And so whatever you've had to do internally to work through that so that you can be the leader that you are today, that's a continuum of work. It is a continuum. One day you'll talk to your child about it. One day you'll talk to your grandchildren about it. And you will feel that slight uneasiness. But what you've decided to do is not allow shame to dictate your next step. You keep moving. You don't let anybody put it on you, and that's the work. Whether you know you're doing it or not, you are. And so that's just an example of how shame can be a part of all of our lives, everybody, but how even with it, you say, yep, that happened. I take full accountability. I want to talk a little bit about what it made me feel like and what I've decided to do with it. Because it's here, it's somewhere around, but you're not letting it in the driver's seat. And that's what's important.
No, that's a wonderful analogy.
Yeah.
The car.
Yeah. That's the best way for me to kind of help people with it at times.
Yeah, no, I would imagine it does.
I asked Ed Henning the same thing. I think when we first met, I was actually training barbers and stylists on mental health and wellness type thing. And I think I said, when did you first decide that if given the opportunity, you would do the work to help heal the community and heal yourself and kind of right some of the wrongs, right? And he said, the moment he got sentenced. Mm. I said, when you first went into prison or jail, he said, in the courtroom, the moment he got sentenced, he knew he was going to be facing a long period of time, which I think was up to 20 years. And he said, at the sentencing, he said, when I have an opportunity, and the moment that I have an opportunity to make this right, I will. And he said, I decided then that I would do it once I entered the penal system. I wouldn't wait. And so I feel like that most likely is the same for you. I feel like I've met many men and women who had the same concept, but you got to also think about the foundation that they come from, the support and the love, whether it's community, whether it's the block, whether it's your parents. You kind of come with that kind of, I can make things better. And if given the opportunity, I will. Everybody doesn't have that. But also that piece of Shannon may not experience shame now. And that's a phenomenal thing. But there will be times when you'll be faced with it because everybody is. And when it comes up, you just know what to do with it. You know how to shift it. You know how not to let it sit and harbor and fester. You may have that tenacity or ability that you've learned from your parents or, I don't know, whoever. You know, it could be genetic, it could be nature versus nurture. But some people have a shame background. They have family dynamics that are looped into shame and suppression of emotions and suppression of accountability. So it's a learned behavior.
I call it the physics of shame. Is usually how I try to demonstrate way people can understand that the way you move in society, you're going to be heavier if you don't know how to carry. Because we all have our bag. Everybody has their bag, right? It's just a matter of how you're carrying that.
Yeah. And if you let it drive you here or drive you there, you chose to say, I'm going to do something to give back, period. And I'm sure even if you were never incarcerated, you probably would have been this guy.
Potentially, I was wondering about that. I can't know, so I never dive into that too much. I got enough things to deal with to be thinking about it. I can figure that out.
I know. But for the most part, we are, kind of that environment we grow up in and how we see ourselves in the world. Very early experiences, very early what we call attachment. If you had secure attachment or unsecure attachment, that's a major thing. You had parents who looked at you, loved you very early from infancy, told you you're it. We're crazy about you. You know what I mean? Those relationships matter so much. And for those that don't have that early attachment, we can trace that to the prison systems. We can trace family trauma and a lot of pain early on in early childhood experiences that lead us to how many folks, men and women, are incarcerated and how that impacts them. But again, like you said, there are many people that are there that shouldn't be. One of the things people should understand is that we are complex beings. Not one thing kind of dictates your life forever. It's multiple experiences that make you up. And so again, going back to early childhood experiences and secureness within ourselves, within our home, but also that if we allow ourselves to kind of not be overwhelmed by those past things, we have an opportunity to see what's available. And I think not enough people understand that there's space for hope, there's space for reintegration of self, there's space to learn. But without, again, accountability, self-reflection, which is huge, connecting to things that bring you hope, whether it's a group of social connections or a passion, like a calling. All those components need to be in place to help people. But in order to kind of reduce some of the things that may come up that make you feel icky inside, like the shame, like the guilt, like the loneliness associated with a lot of it. You must understand that you have all the strength within you to get through this. Many people have, and you're not alone in that. And so one of the things we share with a lot of survivors of trauma is you're not alone. So seeking out support to help somebody process how to be on this path to better coping, better grounding, a better understanding of the human condition would help a lot. Just don't do the work alone.
So I think that's a good ending, is just a kind of an actionable item for people who are supporting someone coming home, is that you can't dictate what that second, third, fourth chance is going to be. No. You just have to be there as you're able to, within your boundaries, supportive for them.
Stay healthy,
support
them, but allow that thing to happen the way it needs to happen. Yeah. And that's work.
Yeah.
That's the work.
It very much is, yeah. The idea that everyone deserves a second chance is problematic in two aspects. It ignores, as Simmone succinctly stated, that very rarely is a second chance enough. Life is not pass-fail. We all get a myriad of chances, yet we like to conceptualize it as limited for those that have a record. And although part of this is semantics, because a large number of folks who use second chance language would definitely not say that's all a person gets, second chance language affects many other folks in ways they aren't aware of. There is a powerful element to the way we speak about things, and second chance language creates this subtle view that not only ignores the fact that so many people never got a first chance, let alone are even getting a true second chance, but it also makes it easier to disregard others for their inevitable human failings. And this in turn seeps into our own brains as a lack of ability to navigate the shame and guilt we virtually all carry for one thing or another, regardless if we have a record. I can't emphasize enough the impact of how we carry shame and guilt in regards to the path our lives take. As Simmone said, it's going to be in the car, but it doesn't have to and should never drive. And I'll stop there before I fall into my soapbox on that topic. But the other reason second chance language is problematic is because some people have been dealt such a terrible hand by life that it is virtually impossible they will ever right their ships. We don't talk about this publicly in liberation work, but I feel it does us a disservice to not acknowledge something that everyone pretty much knows just because it may justify incarceration. However, it doesn't at all justify the prison system that we have. Rather, it points to the need for early intervention to prevent incarceration from ever happening, and a completely different culture of separation when it may be required. It's actually a point of strength in our efforts to address the system if we acknowledge that some people will never be able to turn their lives around, and that it's damn near impossible to say who those people are. I'll leave you with highlighting Simmone's example in her daily walk, what I referred to as attached non-attachment. I've seen how deeply she cares for the people she serves, but I've also seen her protect her peace masterfully to be able to properly serve them as well. I aspire to this and encourage anyone getting involved in this work to evaluate what that balance is for themselves as soon as possible. You have to take oxygen from the mask first before you can help anyone else get oxygen. This doesn't mean neglecting them. In fact, to not accept your limitations is neglectful because it squanders your long-term value to yourself and everyone you would impact if you stayed replenished. Thank you for listening. Peace.